we do not know what is the future of southern transit. And in this sense, the cancellation of South Stream is a short-term breathing space for Belarus and especially Ukraine, but I do not think that it deals with the key issues that originally led Russian actors to seek an alternative to transit through those countries. What I have learned through the research I have done on energy politics is that the past casts a very strong shadow on the present and on the future. And in particular, decisions made in the first formative years of statehood, the first 20 years of statehood of these three states, play a very large role in how their political systems will develop in the future. And in particular, certain ways of doing things that were developed in the first 10, 20 years of independent statehood has a tremendous impact on what will happen later on. If you have a political and economic system which has entrenched the allure of corruption, that has lowered the price of corruption, and that has increased the impact of corrupt rents on the political game, this in the long term is going to make democracy, real democracy, very hard. And we are seeing that today in Ukraine. Even more, I would say, we are seeing today the impact of this not only on democracy, but on the very ability of a state to maintain its statehood. Concerning Belarus, this is also problematic for a different set of reasons, and that set of reasons being that the country, exactly through the benefits of energy trade and energy rents, was able to maintain a standard of living in the last 20 years, or for much of the last 20 years, which would have been unachievable in any other situation. This is a problem because once Lukashenko is gone, and once perhaps this particular type of energy trade is gone, the country will have to start dealing with the reality of economic transition, which it has been able to delay for 20 years, and the social costs of transition. And as we know, that can be deadly for any democratic regime. Concerning Lithuania, I don't have many fears. I think the country has made some very difficult decisions, but decisions that also mean that in the long term its democracy is assured. Undoubtedly, oligarchs can work for or against the interests of a state. This is a very complex role, and it's a complex role that has affected the nature and quality of democracy in these states, but also the nature and quality of what the EU may achieve in these states. Yes, eventually the EU will have to deal with these players, and it's already dealing with them, but the EU needs to be very careful in terms of what is the regulatory and governance context of these relationships, because this involvement of oligarchs in the development of infrastructure will not, by definition, be a positive one. The way a state is embedded in regional and international institutions is key for understanding the framework within which its policy decisions take place, and also the governance framework in which interactions between actors, domestic actors, and with external actors take place. Some of the elements in the Russian relationship with the states, for example, Belarus, are not simply about transfers from the Russian budget, but are about trade modalities that have allowed states like Belarus to benefit on their own, so to speak. So in that sense, there is an impact, but it's not a direct impact. The High Life in Minsk, this is a book about two things. First, how individual leaders have a choice about what to do with energy rents, and how Lukashenko's role as president has meant a particular way of dealing with those energy rents in a way that has increased its popularity. And secondly, this book is about how smaller partners deal with their larger partners or patron states. And it shows that even when we normally talk about Alexander Lukashenko as the last dictator in Europe, as a vassal of Russia, actually he has played a much more cunning game that has allowed tiny Belarus, not even 10 million strong, to very often dictate the terms of the relationship with Russia. Perhaps in the long term this will not work out, and there are many signs in terms of the way energy markets are developing that tell us that this cannot continue forever, but in the 20 years of his presidency, it has worked out very well. And in a situation when we are observing a resurgence in Russian reassertiveness in the post-Soviet area, it is refreshing to also look at an example of a tiny country which it would seem, at least in some ways, has been able to navigate that relationship in a unique way.